Hurricane Luis was an extremely destructive Cape Verde-type hurricane as well as one of the strongest, deadliest and most notable hurricanes of the incredible 1995 Atlantic hurricane season, with maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. Luis was also the strongest hurricane to make landfall, and the third most intense hurricane recorded during the extremely active season. The storm was the 12th tropical storm, 6th hurricane, and second major hurricane of the season. At one point, the storm was one of 4 simultaneous tropical systems in the Atlantic basin, along with Humberto, Iris, and Karen. The storm lasted for 15 days between late August and nearly middle September. The system initially formed from a tropical wave south of Cape Verde Islands, west of Africa on August 27, then subsequently attained tropical storm status on August 29. 2 days later that day, the storm reached hurricane status. Shortly thereafter, it rapidly strengthened into a 150 miles per hour Category 4 hurricane. At this strength, it affected much of the Leeward Islands on September 4 to September 6. Throughout the following days, Luis gradually weakened as it accelerated safely to the west of Bermuda. As a Category 1 hurricane, Luis made landfall on Newfoundland before it became extratropical on September 11. It caused catastrophic damage in Antigua, Barbuda, St. Barthélemy, Sint Maarten and Anguilla as a Category 4 with winds of 135 miles per hour. The storm accounted for 19 deaths, left nearly 70,000 homeless and caused roughly $3 billion in damage across the affected areas. Hurricane Luis was the most devastating hurricane and alongside Hurricane Donna, the strongest hurricane to strike the northern Leeward Islands in the 20th century and the strongest storm to hit the Leeward Islands since Hurricane Hugo. Additionally, Luis was the second of 3 tropical cyclones to affect Guadeloupe in a short period of time, the first being Hurricane Iris a week before and the last being Hurricane Marilyn only 10 days afterward. The next year, the Leeward Islands would be struck by Hurricane Bertha, while still repairing from Luis and Marilyn, then successively hit by Hortense, Erica, George, Jose, Lenny and Debbie. Luis was also responsible for an intense rogue wave which struck RMS Queen Elizabeth II on Monday, September 11, though the ship pulled through with hardly any damage. Meteorological history. The origins of Hurricane Luis trace back to an area of disturbed weather associated with a tropical wave over the eastern Atlantic Ocean on August 26. A low-level circulation center formed and moved westward until it developed a weak surface low on August 27. Consequently, a tropical depression was designated at 1200 UTC that day. The depression attained 36 hours later into a tropical storm named Luis on August 29. Though convective activity fluctuated for the next 2 days, as a result of nearby wind shear, the storm slowly intensified while pressure rose. The shear relented the next day, allowing an eye to gradually form, and the system attained hurricane status thereafter on early August 31, then a Category 3 major hurricane 18 hours later. Hurricane Luis continued to strengthen as it tracked west-northwestward into a Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale on September 2, and the cyclone turned more towards the west earlier that day as it maintained a rectilinear slow motion. On September 3, a reconnaissance aircraft confirmed that the storm, that reached Category 4 status earlier, peaked with 140 miles per hour and maintained it for 2 days and a half. At this time, it was located approximately 540 miles to the east of the Lesser Antilles. As a result, the storm began to slightly accelerate as it moved along a subtropical ridge due to the absorption of Karen by the stronger Iris. By the day of September 4, Luis sustained a large wind field as it approached the Lesser Antilles. Its tropical storm force winds measured from 345 miles to 365 miles in diameter as it began to affect it in the night Antigua, Barbuda, Dominica and Guadeloupe. On the morning of September 5, islands such as Dominica and even the islands of Guadeloupe, where it experienced hurricane-force winds on the northeastern coast of Grande Terre and Des Serrades, has been relatively spared by the storm. However, the eye wall of the hurricane skimmed Antigua and directly passing over Barbuda while weakened slightly. During the time, it proceeded slowly northwestward affecting Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Eustatius and Saba, causing moderate damage. Later, Luis moved along St. Barthélemy Street, Martin and ultimately crossed Anguilla, where maximum sustained winds within the eye wall were estimated to have reached 135 miles per hour, and its central pressure had dropped from 945 to 942 millibars. A large and powerful hurricane, Luis retained Category 4 intensity until September 7, situated about 150 miles to the north of Puerto Rico. The storm gradually recurved over the northern Atlantic as a Category 2 after having spent 7 consecutive days as a major hurricane with maximum sustained winds of at least 115 miles per hour from September 1 to 8. For thereon, the center of the storm passed 200 miles to the west of Bermuda on September 9, causing minor damage, and then later weakened to a Category 2 hurricane with winds of 110 miles per hour. Several hours later, the hurricane made its closest approach to Bermuda, passing about 200 miles west of the island. Later that day, the storm began to accelerate as it traveled northeast ahead of a strong trough located to the northwest of Luis. During the afternoon of September 10, Hurricane Luis began to undergo an extratropical transition as it rapidly approached the Canadian coastline. Due to the rapid movement of the storm, significant weakening did not occur until Luis was at an unusually high latitude as the central pressure of the storm decreased to 961 millibars, but sustained winds did not exceed 90 miles per hour according to the NHC. Luis maintained this intensity until it made landfall on the Avalon Peninsula in eastern Newfoundland early on September 11. While tracking over Newfoundland, cold, dry air became entrenched in Luis' circulation and the system began to merge with the approaching trough. The NHC issued the final advisory on Hurricane Luis at 0900 UTC on September 11 as it tracked nearly 65 miles per hour to the northeast and transitioned into an extratropical cyclone on September 11 as it moved ashore on eastern Newfoundland. The extratropical remnants persisted for 30 more hours over the North Atlantic Ocean before being absorbed by the trough near the southern coast of Greenland late on September 12. Preparations. 3 days before devastation occurred in the northern Lesser Antilles, Hurricane Luis became a Category 4 hurricane and forecasted to avoid those areas well to the north following Humberto and Karen. However, as Karen neared Iris, it weakened and absorbed by a stronger Iris as influenced by the subtropical ridge, steering Luis to the west, Leeward Islands and Puerto Rico due to its slow motion, giving local officials ample time to prepare. In advance of the storm, tropical cyclone watches and warnings were declared in several areas throughout the Caribbean. 17 watches and/or warnings were issued in association with Luis. The first 2 were a hurricane watch issued on Antigua, Barbuda and Guadeloupe on September 2 at 2,200 2100 UTC. 5 hours later, a tropical storm watch was issued for Dominica. At 2100 UTC, a hurricane warning was issued for Antigua, Barbuda, and a hurricane watch for Guadeloupe. At 1500 UTC, Puerto Rico was put under a tropical storm watch. At 1700 UTC, Guadeloupe, St. Barthélemy, and French portion of Sint Maarten were put under a hurricane warning. 4 hours later, Puerto Rico, U.S., and British Virgin Islands were put under a tropical storm warning. This is including Martinique and St. Lucia, Bermuda, and Canada. Additionally, a tropical storm warning was also issued for Bermuda on September 7, all of which were cancelled by September 10. However, there were no tropical storm watches or warnings issued for any part of Atlantic Canada. Impact: Leeward Islands. Overall, Luis caused extensive crop and property damage across the Leeward Islands due to its high associated powerful winds and heavy rainfall. The exact amount of damage caused by the storm is unknown due to lack of reports from impacted areas since Aries, though it is estimated at $3 billion. Antigua and Barbuda. As a result of a direct hit from the Category 4 hurricane, both Antigua and Barbuda experienced extensive damage to residences from 135 miles/hour winds and over 10 inches of rain. According to the island's Prime Minister, a great amount of houses were damaged or destroyed in Barbuda, and nearly 45% of the residences on Antigua were eradicated by the hurricane as it passed 25 miles to the north of the island. Across the islands, numerous inhabitants experienced power outages and disrupted water systems. The storm ultimately accounted for 3 deaths and injured 165 locals. 32,000 inhabitants on both islands were greatly impacted, forced 1,700 people to take shelter and left approximately 3,200 others homeless. Throughout the country, the total damage from the storm was estimated $350 million, or 60% of the country's GDP worth of damage was assessed. International aid was sought after the storm had made its passing, with shelter and food supplies being the most needed. Sanitary conditions worsened substantially, resulting in an increase of infectious mosquito plagues. However, the situation improved 2 weeks later as international facilities supplied financial support and aid, including $200,000 USD from France. Guadeloupe. Luis caused some damage as it passed 60 miles north of Guadeloupe, essentially of Grande-Terre. Hurricane force condition resulted in of moderate damage to homes and roofs, uprooted trees, and severe beach erosion. Meanwhile, the Basse-Terre region received minor damage, except banana crops that had been damaged at nearly 100% and sugarcane crops on the north at nearly 20%. Additionally, 5 to 11 inches of rain were recorded in the islands, while the mountains regions recorded up to 20 inches as the highest rainfall was 22.91 inches. In La Grande Saufriere within the 48-hour period, that damaged some roads, specifically in the west coast where high waves washed houses and coastal roads. The Meteorological Office in Raizé recorded sustained winds of 48 miles/hour with gusts reached 66 miles/hour, reported a fall in minimal pressure to 994 MB around 3 to 4 a.m. on September 5 and a total 178 millimeters of rain during the whole period. Only the easternmost island, Desirade, recorded a hurricane-force wind at 75 miles/hour and a sustained gust at 84 miles/hour between 3 and 4 on September 5 and a 990 MB pressure. The storm claimed the life of a 29-year-old French tourist, who had been dragged away by vigorous waves on a pier in eastern Saint-François. The total damage estimated at 250 million francs, especially for the crops and the roads. Sint Maarten, the island, received the hardest condition of the eye wall as Luis passed 15 miles to 20 miles northeast of Sint Maarten, causing very extensive damage at 70% and spawning several F3 tornadoes. A total of 6.50 in of rain has been recorded on the island's territory during the 48 hours period. In Grand Case Bay, 90% of the houses were damaged or destroyed as a result of rough sea conditions and very strong winds. Damage was also common in other towns, such as Marigot, French Quarter and Philipsburg, where at least 70% of the city was decimated by the storm. It also caused the Great Salt Pond to deluge several streets, leaving them partially submerged by 1 foot. Of the 1,500 boats sheltered in Simpson Bay Lagoon, nearly 1,300 or 85% were sunken or run aground. Furthermore, the hurricane impacted 32,000, on which 7,000 were left people homeless. At least 60% of the residences of the island's 50,000 people were damaged, as nearly 15% of them were completely destroyed, as some of them made uninhabitable. This is including businesses, churches, hotels, and some schools. Some towns in the island spent nearly 3 months without water and power. Luis killed 9 people. Princess Juliana Airport recorded 87 miles per hour sustained winds with maximum gusts of 114 miles per hour. The barometric pressure at its lowest fell between 963 to 964 millibars. The Met Office on the French side of the island also measured a wind gust of 202 miles per hour, while an unofficial anemometer in Marigot's Marina recorded wind gusts around 126 miles per hour. Tropical storm force winds brushed the islands for approximately 21 to 24 hours, while hurricane force winds lasted up to 10 hours as the hurricane passed, with minimal forward speed between 7 miles per hour to 9 miles per hour. Total damages in both sides was astronomical, accounted for $1.8 billion worth of damage. As such, Luis was the most devastating hurricane to hit the islands since Hurricane Donna in 1960. Anguilla, the eye of the hurricane, passed on the northeastern tip of Anguilla. Although the island would have sustained worse damage than of Sint Maarten, total damage was still unknown. Luis was the worst hurricane the island suffered from 1960's Hurricane Donna. St. Barthélemy, the island suffered extensive damages from 135 miles per hour winds as the hurricane passed 155 miles north of St. Barthélemy. The main weather station recorded wind speeds of 125 miles per hour and gusts of up to 155 miles per hour. This difference may be due to local effects produced by mountainous terrain on the island and the aircraft sampling winds at a level above the region of maximum winds. Additionally, minimal recorded pressure was at 948 millibars as the storm made its closest approach and stay below 1000 millibars for at least 36 hours period. St. Kitts and Nevis. Luis passed nearly 50 miles northeast that caused very severe beach erosion, moderate damage to residences and leaving at least 2,000 homeless on St. Kitts and Nevis. The vegetation and some of the road infrastructure was badly damaged as a result of the storm, with problems essentially arising in relation to the poor water system. Total damage ultimately reached to $197 million. Dominica. As Luis passed nearly at 120 miles north, majority of the damage experienced in Dominica was inflicted to banana crops that had been already damaged from iris at 70%, while overall damages was fairly minor. Beach erosion was common and that disrupted and washed few beach hotels and coastal roads, where about 1,000 people were left homeless due to rough waves on the northeastern and the western coast of the island's towns such as Marigot, Roseau and Portsmouth. 40 miles tropical storm force wind affected most part of the islands from the earliest on September 5 until the afternoon of September 5, and lowest pressure recorded was between 1,000 to 1,005 millibars. Ultimately, a fisherman was confirmed killed due to rough sea conditions. All in all, property damage was estimated at $47 million. The storm contributed to the effects of Hurricane Iris, which had struck the country a week before, and Hurricane Marilyn 10 days after, total at $184 million. Puerto Rico. Luis passed at 120 miles northeast of Puerto Rico, causing minor damages in the east. There were 2 death reports in the islands. Bermuda reported sustained winds of 46 miles per hour. However, little to no damage has been reported. Offshore, the storm produced waves approaching 100 feet in height. Eastern United States and offshore rough seas from the storm affected the U.S. East Coast, resulting in some beach erosion and damage to 2 waterfront structures on Fire Island. On September 7, rip currents produced by Luis caused the death of 1 person near Corn Cake Inlet, North Carolina. High waves, in combination with high tide, caused significant beach erosion and coastal flooding. In Brunswick County, 8 homes were washed away by the waves and 40 feet of beach was lost. In Hyde, Carteret, and Onslow counties, waves up to 17 feet washed out 33 feet of the Triple S Pier in Atlantic Beach was destroyed. Total losses in North Carolina amounted to $1.9 million. In New York, rough seas undermined 1 home, destroyed it and led to the death of 1 person who was swimming in the high waves. On September 11, a rogue wave triggered by Luis slammed the Queen Elizabeth II when it was about 200 nautical miles south of eastern Newfoundland. At about the same time, a nearby Canadian buoy recorded a 98-foot wave. Though the ship did not sustain any significant damage, its arrival in New York was delayed considerably. Atlantic Canada throughout eastern Newfoundland, the system dropped 2.4 to 4.7 inches of rain at its landfall as a Category 1. Northwesterly winds that gusted to 81 miles per hour. The storm caused minor damage to the large province. 1 storm-related death was reported in Canada. Flooding from Luis caused an estimated $500,000 in damages. Aftermath and economic impact. Antigua, Barbuda, Dominica and St. Kitts and Nevis. By September 29, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs provided both Antigua and Barbuda and the Netherlands Antilles with $50,000 in emergency funds. Furthermore, the United Nations Development Programme provided $50,000 for both Barbados and the Netherlands Antilles. For the reconstruction of schools, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization provided $20,000 to Antigua and Barbuda, $15,000 to Dominica, and $5,000 to St. Kitts and Nevis. The United Nations Children's fund provided a cash grant of $20,000 to all the affected islands. The European Community Humanitarian Aid Office provided relief goods, such as plastic sheeting, water containers, blankets, and basic medical supplies worth $1.2 million. The Organization of American States provided an emergency cash grant of $250,000 for Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and St. Kitts and Nevis. The Government of Australia provided Antigua and Barbuda with $37,593 in relief funds. The Government of the Bahamas provided $50,000 to the affected areas in emergency funds. The Government of Canada donated $149,253 to the Pan American Health Organization and $44,760 to the affected areas. The Government of France contributed $200,000 in emergency funds to Antigua and Barbuda. The Government of Germany provided $52,817 in emergency funds to St. Kitts and Nevis. The Government of Jamaica deployed military recovery teams to affected regions to assist with rehabilitation and cleaned-up efforts. The Government of Japan contributed $150,000 in emergency funds to the affected region. The Government of Norway provided $50,000 in cash assistance to Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts and Nevis. The Government of the Netherlands provided $15.2 million in emergency funds and recovery funds to the Netherlands Antilles. The Government of New Zealand provided a cash assist of $32,942 to Antigua and Barbuda. The Government of Spain contributed $15,873 in emergency funds to the affected regions. Sint Maarten. Aside from high winds and seas, possible explanation for the storm's heavy damage may have been complacency on the part of local island populations and the houses. Another factual reason was substantial difference in wind speed forecasts measured at sea level Princess Juliana Airport on the Dutch side and those measured on homes throughout the island hillsides and AMP broadcast from sites off the island. Sea level airport readings showed 86 miles per hour sustained winds and winds gusting to 114 miles per hour, whereas measurements on some hillside homes and especially the airport on the north of the French side, between two mountains, showed wind gusts between 170 and 205 miles per hour. A sailor that been sheltered in the lagoon recorded a 115 miles per hour winds gusting and a minimal pressure reading to 965 millibars. Records and retirement. When Tropical Depression 13 strengthened into Tropical Storm Luis on August 29, it marked the earliest date on which the 12th named storm of any season formed, surpassing the previous record set by Tropical Storm 12 of the 1933 season. Shortly before becoming extratropical, Hurricane Luis was moving at 65 miles per hour, becoming at this time the fastest Atlantic hurricane in recorded history. On September 11, a 98-feet wave struck an ocean liner. This wave is the largest wave ever recorded. However, Hurricane Ivan in 2004 may have produced a wave up to 130 feet high off the coast of Mexico. Since 1950, very few storms with ACE over 50 occurred, as it spent 14 days as a named storm. Luis ACE is the highest since Hurricane Allen in 1980 and remained it until surpassed by Hurricane Isabel, then surpassed by Hurricane Ivan. Unlike the last two storms, it peaked as an Category 4 hurricane and spent 7 days consecutive as a major hurricane. due to the very severe devastating impacts and loss of life caused in the Leeward Islands. The name Luis was retired in the spring of 1996, and will never again be used for an Atlantic hurricane. It was replaced with Lorenzo in the 2001 season. Luis was the first Atlantic hurricane name to be retired in 3 years since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. This marks one of only 4 different 3-year gaps between retirements, with the others being 1957 to 1960, 1980 to 1983 and 1985 to 1988.